He was one of the most well-liked comedians in America and the face of Doritos. Avery Schreiber then disappeared from the public eye in 1973. Everyone was surprised by what transpired next. An unsuccessful variety show, a sour spat with his comedy partner, and a covert conflict that nearly claimed his life. At last, the truth behind his disappearance is emerging, and it's more sinister than anyone could have predicted. On April 9, 1935, Avery Schreiber was born in Chicago, Illinois. His mother worked as a secretary, while he was a laborer. Despite their lack of material possessions, they instilled in him the importance of diligence. Chicago was a vibrant city. The city was alive with comedy clubs, music, and theaters. Avery was captivated by that world from an early age. He was always the witty child who could make an ordinary situation extraordinary. He was more than just a joke teller. He moved in a certain way. The way he responded, the way he gave others a sense of belonging. He enjoyed making others laugh. It was instinctive. It felt natural. He made a choice at the age of 17 that would alter everything. He joined the American Army. Like many young guys at the time, it was a sensible decision. However, an unforeseen event occurred. Unconcerned, he went into the all-army talent show. Everything clicked when he took the stage. The crowd's enthusiasm, applause, and laughter were all electrifying. Something ignited inside him at that instant. He was aware of his goals. He didn't waste time when he got home. He enrolled at one of Chicago's top acting schools, the Goodman Theater. He desired to become well-versed in all aspects of performing. He made sure he had a safety net by attending classes at the University of Chicago at night. He had a lot to balance, but he remained adamant. Theater was thrilling, but what really captivated him was improvisation. Creating a scene in real time, bouncing off other actors, and keeping the audience on edge was an exciting experience. The epicenter of improv, and Avery was at the perfect moment. He discovered Second City at that point. Everything changed when he joined the ensemble in 1960. Some of the best comedians were born in Second City, which was more than simply another comic company. They played in front of large audiences every night, pushed limits, and tried out new concepts. For Avery Schreiber, Second City was more than just a stage. He developed his abilities and discovered his comic voice there. He collaborated with some of the most significant names in improvisational theater, such as Viola Spolin and Del Close, for 5 years. Their revolutionary style to humor was based on improvisation and teamwork. Schreiber's career would be defined by his quick wit and timing, which he developed as a result of this milieu. He participated in a number of noteworthy performances while he was there, such as Story Theater and Paul Sills Ovid's Metamorphosis. These performances served as teaching tools for character development, narrative, and the effectiveness of improvisation. He had to be quick-witted, respond on the spot, and come up with something new for every job. Each time he took the stage. He would benefit much from that flexibility in the years to come. However, his influence extended beyond Chicago. Schreiber gained recognition well beyond his birthplace when he was a part of a Second City revue that traveled around New York. This marked a sea change. Laughing in a small theater wasn't the only goal. Reaching a national audience was the goal. The event laid the groundwork for his subsequent success by assisting him in his shift from local talent to a well-known figure in comedy. Schreiber never lost sight of his origins. He returned to Second City later in his career to teach, imparting his knowledge to the following generation. It was more than just technique here. It focused on improv philosophy, embracing failure, following your gut, and constantly saying yes to the present. That complete circle event demonstrated how profoundly Second City had influenced him as a mentor as well as a performer. Schreiber and Jack Burns' careers were drastically altered by their encounter at Second City in 1962. Although Burns had begun his career as a news anchor in Boston, he had a talent for comedy. His vivacious, fast-talking delivery provided the ideal counterpoint to Schreiber's more somber, emotional approach. Their signature was that contrast. Although they clicked right away, they had a deeper bond than just performing together. Later, Burns would refer to Schreiber as his closest friend and 40-year comedic partner. They were able to push one another's creativity, improve their work, and take chances because of their bond. The taxi cab routine was their breakthrough performance. Burns portrayed a chatty passenger who interspersed every sentence with a tiring portrayal of a cab driver who was barely surviving the journey. It was straightforward but fantastic. It became one of their most well-known moments very fast because of how natural and sharp their dynamic was. Audiences were enthralled with their performance on The Tonight Show with Jack Paar in 1964. They went beyond sketching, though. In their CD, The Watergate Comedy Hour, they delved into political satire, using humor to address weighty subjects. A keen, humorous perspective on events resonated with audiences during a time when political scandals dominated news. It wasn't always easy to succeed. They temporarily split up in 1968 because they thought their performance was getting monotonous. However, innovative collaborations like theirs don't simply end. They got back together in 1972. Additionally, the Burns and Schreiber Comedy Hour, their own variety show, debuted a year later. The evening demonstrated that they had moved past their early routines while remaining loyal to their humorous beginnings by combining sketches, musical numbers, and guest performers. Regardless of their actions, people consistently returned to the taxicab habit. It wasn't only a drawing. It was a comedy timing masterclass. Audiences loved to repeat Burns' incessant questions as a running joke. The more frustrated Schreiber became, the more hilarious it was. Over time, the sketch changed, showing up in various performances and shows, but its essence remained constant. It was a straightforward idea done flawlessly. It persisted for that reason. It has nothing to do with a specific time period or source. It was shared by everybody. In addition to being funny, the routine demonstrated their effective collaboration. Their responses were automatic, and their timing was perfect. By utilizing one another's advantages, they produced something that was better than the sum of its parts. It was the kind of relationship that rarely occurs in comedy. Burns and Schreiber were regulars on popular variety shows that hosted some of the biggest names in comedy and music during the 1960s, including The Hollywood Palace, The Ed Sullivan Show, and The Dean Martin Show. Burns and Schreiber took full advantage of the opportunity to be seen by millions of people by appearing on them. With Burns portraying the strange, erratic force of chaos and Schreiber as the frustrated straight man, their performances frequently emphasized their disparate styles. Their appeal was largely due to this equilibrium. Their sketches spanned from broad slapstick to more nuanced character-driven humor, in contrast to certain comic duos that stuck to the same techniques. In addition to their well-practiced taxicab routine, they may improvise based on current affairs, which would give their humor a new and contemporary vibe. They always managed to engage viewers, whether they were on the more relaxed, lighthearted Dean Martin Show or the more regimented Ed Sullivan Show. Burns and Schreiber expanded their skills beyond television to include comedy albums by the 1970s. The Watergate Comedy Hour, one of their most well-known productions, used scathing humor to address the decade's largest political scandal. This CD, which was published by Little David Records, included a variety of sketches that made light of the Watergate incident, making fun of everyone from Richard Nixon to the reporters who covered it. Burns and Schreiber weren't the only ones. The CD, which featured contributions from other comedians like Frank Welker, Jack Riley, and Bob Ridgely, offered a scathing, multi-layered comedy perspective on politics. Songs like The Plan, The Break-In, and Youth Wants to Know used humor to deconstruct the controversy and make difficult political subjects approachable and enjoyable. Throughout his career, Schreiber in particular continued to explore his ability for political humor. The Watergate Humor Hour's popularity demonstrated that humor could be used for purposes other than amusement. It might also serve as a commentary, a method of thinking about and analyzing the world. Burns and Schreiber's status as more than just a variety show was solidified by this album. They were astute, socially conscious actors who dared to tackle difficult subjects. Their dynamic was a key factor in their partnership's success. Their chemistry was been compared as a marriage of opposites. Schreiber portrayed the reacting straight man with his expressive face and physical humor. Burns was the catalyst, his intense energy and fast-paced speaking. They seemed to be merely exaggerating their true selves for comedic effect, and their relationships felt genuine. Since their first days at Second City, where they had mastered the skill of utilizing one another's strengths, this synergy had been evident. Burns' pranks were made funnier by Schreiber's ability to respond with the ideal balance of annoyance and confusion. The unpredictable nature of Burns, however, kept viewers on edge. Schreiber's responses gave those moments structure, and you never knew what he would do next. Even though they had a solid connection, they also gave each other space to develop as individuals. While Schreiber worked on projects like My Mother the Car, Burns moved on to work on The Andy Griffith Show. Because of the indisputable charm of their humorous collaboration, they consistently returned to one another even as they pursued different chances. Jack Burns and Avery Schreiber finally had their own show in 1973. They started the Burns and Schreiber Comedy Hour on ABC after years of performing together. This was their opportunity to reach a larger audience with their distinct brand of humor. They began honing their act at Second City in Chicago and spent years honing their witty humor and incisive improvisation. With the synergy that made them such a fantastic combo, they combined satire, music, and sketch comedy in their new program. With his trademark bushy mustache, Schreiber exuded a lovable, teddy bear-like demeanor. Burns, on the other hand, was witty and quick-witted. Their act had always revolved around this contrast. They effortlessly transitioned from slapstick to intelligent satire, playing off one another flawlessly. They were able to demonstrate their entire range on the performance, alternating between witty observational humor and big physical comedy. The show struggled in spite of their talent. With so many variety shows in the early 1970s, viewers had many options. Despite having well-known guests like Tina Turner, George Carlin, and Loretta Sweet, the series was unable to garner a large audience. The network believed that the sophisticated humor would resonate with mainstream viewers, but it didn't. Los Angeles Times reporter Cecil Smith commended their efforts. Their manner, which was uncommon for television comedy at the time, was described by him as literate and articulate. However, the show was not saved by positive reviews. The Burns and Schreiber Comedy Hour was canceled after just one season because ratings were crucial. It was a turning point for both comedians. In an attempt to start something new, they had gotten back together in the early 1970s. Their breakthrough was meant to come with this show. Rather, it became their final significant endeavor together. Their careers diverged following the cancellation. Schreiber's success in advertising was surprising. He played a variety of roles in Doritos advertisements, including chefs and pilots, and became well known. For years, he was one of the most recognizable pitchmen on television because of his expressive face and lighthearted delivery, which made him a natural for advertisements. Burns went behind the scenes to concentrate on producing and writing. He was a major character on ABC's 1980 to 1982 sketch comedy program Fridays. Despite never achieving Saturday Night Live's level of fame, it aided in the beginning of comedians Larry David and Michael Richards' careers. Burns continued to have a significant impact on humor. Even if he wasn't the center of attention anymore. Their bond remained strong even after they stopped working together. For 40 years, Burns referred to Schreiber as his closest buddy and comic partner. Although their tenure on the Burns and Schreiber Comic Hour was brief, their influence on comedy endured for a very long time. Avery Schreiber went it alone after splitting with Jack Burns and succeeded in television. Even though he was no longer a member of a comedic pair, he continued to work hard. Rather, it allowed him to experiment with various parts and demonstrate his versatility. He was the misfortune teller on Chico and the Man in 1975. Although it was a little role, it perfectly suited his abilities. This was just another example of how he made quirky folks seem more than they actually were. He tackled something quite different with the Rockford Files the following year. He appeared in the Rattlers class of '63 episode, demonstrating that he could handle drama just as well as comedy. He also made an appearance on The Muppet Show that year. It was the ideal fit. He had no issue keeping up with the Muppets, whose wild, unexpected humor perfectly matched his energy. Schreiber continued to be active, participating in a number of shows. Even though he was only on screen briefly, he had a way of making guest performances stand out. Additionally, he started appearing frequently on game shows, particularly Match Game. He was a popular favorite because of his quick wit. He did more than respond to inquiries. Every moment became amusement for him. His performance in My Mother the Car stands out as one of his most unforgettable roles. A program with one of the most bizarre storylines ever seen on television. When Jerry Van Dyke's character purchases an old car, he learns it's actually his mother in a previous life. Captain Bernard Mancini, portrayed by Schreiber, was a rapacious collector who would do anything to have the vehicle for himself. He had an unrelenting and somewhat absurd personality. He was constantly plotting and attempting to deceive others into giving him the automobile. Additionally, he frequently mispronounced the name of the main character, making a recurring joke out of it. Despite only having one season, the sitcom went on to become a cult favorite. People remembered it because of the entertaining performances as well as the odd concept. One of the best aspects of the program was Schreiber's character. He transformed what would have been a straightforward antagonist into a memorable character. A bag of Doritos helped make Avery Schreiber one of the most iconic figures of the 1970s and 1980s. His advertisements turned into one of the most iconic advertising campaigns of the time. The pattern was the same for all the commercials. As a judge, a knight, a grocer, and someone attempting to maintain control of a situation, Schreiber portrayed a serious persona. Then someone in the vicinity chewed into a Dorito. Everything was thrown into disarray by the deafening crunch. The sound constantly distracted him, no matter how hard he tried to maintain control. He became so frustrated that he eventually gave in and grabbed a taste for himself. Schreiber made the advertisements effective. He was readily recognizable due to his huge mustache and untamed hair. Made others chuckle. In a few seconds, he might be utterly unhinged and then calm again. He was a respectable British judge once. The next, the courtroom collapsed around him, and he was losing control. In a different commercial, he portrayed a pool champion who was trying to set up the ideal shot but was distracted by the crunching and missed it entirely. He played a dictator of a banana nation in one of the funniest ads. He enthusiastically presented a soldier with a medal while wearing his full uniform. Everything fell apart at the sound of Doritos. His attempt at control disappeared, his decorations slipped off, and his uniform ripped apart. More than 40 iterations of the campaign kept the joke current for years. It was always entertaining, regardless of how many times people watched Schreiber lose his temper. He was ideal for the part because of his ability to transition between serious and slapstick. People looked forward to the advertisements because he did more than just promote Doritos. Of that pinch in Schreiber's response to it. His influence was so great that the New York Times specifically mentioned his Doritos commercials as one of the pivotal events in his career when they reported on his death in 2002. Even when he wasn't the major character, Avery Schreiber had a way of taking center stage. His decades-long film career was full of parts that capitalized on his comedic abilities. He portrayed Pulaski, a figure who added humor to an action-packed, pirate adventure in Swashbuckler, 1976. There were daring escapes, treasure searches, and sword clashes in the movie. The cast was led by James Earl Jones and Robert Shaw, so the action never halted. It was Schreiber's responsibility to use humor to diffuse the tension, and he succeeded. His facial expressions alone have the power to make an ordinary occasion humorous. Despite not being praised by all critics, the movie had a lot of charm. He made an appearance in the final Beau Geste remake a year later. In addition to making fun of vintage adventure films, this movie totally turned them upside down. Schreiber portrayed a used camel trader and an Arab chieftain. Both were outrageous, exaggerated, and exactly what the movie required. Even the most ridiculous characters seemed natural to him. He understood comedies, not simply acted in them. By 1981, he appeared in the Ringo Starr movie Caveman. There was hardly any actual speech in this ancient comedy. Because the characters grunted when speaking, the primary focus was on physical humor. Aback, portrayed by Schreiber, was a caveman who only used facial expressions and body language. It was full of slapstick humor and was absurd and silly. Audiences seeking something humorous adored it, while other critics were unsure on how to interpret it. It developed to become a cult favorite over time. He collaborated with Mel Brooks in the 1990s, a filmmaker who could elevate any genre to hilarious perfection. Schreiber as a tax assessor in the 1993 film Robin Hood, Men in Tights. Despite the short role, his performance left a lasting impression. 2 years later, he played a peasant on a coach in the 1995 film Dracula, Dead and Loving It. It was just another brief segment, but it didn't matter. He was adept at making the most of every second. Comedy was simply one aspect of Avery Schreiber's life, he spent much of it making people laugh. He was married. A teacher and a father who genuinely cared about those around him. He wed Rochelle Isaacs in 1962. Before he passed away in 2002, they were married for more than 40 years. They had 2 kids. Avery always found time for Jenny, Joshua, and themselves. He never allowed work to take him away from home, even after his career took off in the 1970s. He performed on television and in nightclubs as a member of the comedic team Burns and Schreiber. Family, however, came first. He prioritized striking that balance, even if it wasn't always simple. His comedy and his personal life were intertwined. It was a component of it. The humor he brought to the stage was influenced by the warmth and fun he shared with his family. In every way, Rochelle was his collaborator, not simply his spouse. Through the erratic world of entertainment, she supported him through difficult times and rejoiced when things went well. Their children were raised in a creative and humorous environment where storytelling and humor were commonplace. Avery was well known not only for his family life but also for his health issues in his senior years. Because of his diabetes, he experienced a heart attack in 1994. He had triple bypass surgery, but his health setback never completely healed him. Notwithstanding these difficulties, Avery never wavered in his devotion to his family and was active in their lives until his death on January 7, 2002, at the age of 66. Avery made a lasting impression as a teacher in addition to his performances. He was a believer in improvisational theater, not merely someone who performed it. In 1961, he joined Second City, a theater company credited with influencing contemporary comedy. Actors there developed their ability to think quickly, follow their gut feelings, and collaborate with others. By teaching those skills to the following generation, Avery rose to become one of its most admired instructors. Viola Spolin, whose book Improvisation for the Theater served as the basis for improv, had an impact on his instruction. He thought that being totally present, responding in the moment, and accepting the unknown produced the best comedy. He helped students develop self-confidence and their creative abilities while teaching at Second City in Chicago and Los Angeles. In addition to training comedians, he encouraged others to have faith in their own judgment and take calculated risks. Avery Schreiber was able to make audiences laugh because of her skill, charm, and timing. However, he never received the same level of attention as some of his contemporaries, even though he was successful. Despite his talent as a comic, he continued to play a supporting role rather than the star. Executives in Hollywood and television knew exactly what a celebrity should be. They were looking for charismatic, conventionally beautiful, and marketable leading men. Despite his obvious talent, Avery didn't fit that stereotype. His performances were based on physicality, his humor was overdone, and his facial emotions were larger than life. Instead of carrying a whole program or movie, he was the type of actor who stole sequences. As a result, he was given supporting parts, cameos, and advertisements. Although his career was stable, he was rarely the focus of attention. Avery left a lasting impression even though she was never awarded the lead role. In addition to being a performer, he was also a mentor, educator, and influential figure in the improvisational comedy community. Generations of comedians that followed him were influenced by his work with the Second City. Actors learned to embrace spontaneity from him, should follow their gut feelings and work together to create humor.